Welcome to this presentation from the Wisconsin First Detector Network. This video was adapted from a Wisconsin First Detector Network training session. In this video, you'll hear Paul Skawinski from UW Extension Lakes Program talk about water hyacinth, water lettuce, and parrot feather.
So we looked at this picture a little while ago of a typical water garden with many non-native species in it. This is the Mississippi River in Alma in 2012, this would have been. And this is a big bay, it's in the middle of the Mississippi River channel, but it was surrounded by large beds of wild rice and lotus and burr reeds. So there was sort of this little protected, isolated area within the middle of the stream channel. And it was probably maybe 6 or 8 acres in size. And almost that entire area was covered by floating mats of water hyacinth and water lettuce, and even, just for good measure, a little bit of parrot feather, as you can see in the foreground of this shot. And these happen to be the 3 most commonly imported plant species for water gardens, all occurring together in this one site. So it was really interesting that they all happened to show up in this fairly isolated, hard to access area. It's not possible to just throw it off the side of the road and have it land in this area. It was probably a quarter-mile boat trip from the nearest boat landing or land from the shore out to this site. So one theory was that somebody was actually purposely introducing these plants to this area in order to essentially farm them. That seems to be sort of the most feasible theory, actually. There were what we estimated to be about 80,000 plants in this area. And these plants typically go for a couple dollars each. So you're talking about maybe a couple $100,000 worth of plant inventory there if somebody were to do that. But it was certainly unusual or a strange coincidence that all 3 of the most commonly sought after water garden species happen to occur together in this one site. So the parrot feather, thankfully, was actually just 2 stems that had been creeping along producing more shoots. And we were able to just grab the 2 ends of that clump and just pull the whole population into the boat. So that worked out really well. We didn't have to worry about how effective an herbicide treatment would be or anything, because we were able to just manually remove the entire population in one quick move. The water hyacinth and water lettuce were chemically treated by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and anything left over after that treatment that was not killed was manually removed with dip nets. They just drove through and removed any live plants. This population, or this pool of the Mississippi River, actually had water hyacinth and water lettuce 2 years in a row in slightly different locations, but in the same pool. So we don't know if the plants were actually overwintering or if they were just reintroduced in another year. Both of them are considered to be, I believe, Zone 7 or Zone 8 plants. They're meant to be in the southern U.S. or south of there, very warm climates, so they're not expected to survive here. Certainly the adult plants cannot. If the air temperature gets down to 40 or high 30s, those plants immediately start just deteriorating. But if the plant could get through its entire life cycle and produce a viable seed, then that's one possibility that we're considering, that the seeds were actually produced and overwintered in the sediments of this pool of the Mississippi and sprouted the next spring. So a little more about the water hyacinth. This is a species that is native to South America, and in the 1880s there was a large exposition taking place in New Orleans. I guess somebody had this bright idea that water hyacinth was just such a fantastic plant that everybody attending this convention should have one. So it was given away as sort of a door prize to all the attendees at this exposition. So shortly thereafter, it started showing up in a lot of different locations around the southeast, and that continues to be the area where it's most problematic today because of the long growing season and the warm climate. You may also see it listed online called blue shell flower. That's one of the challenges of regulating some of these plants, is that they go by many names. And in some cases they go by old, out-of-date Latin names even, or multiple Latin names. Sometimes they're just sort of made up or terribly misspelled, so it's even difficult for some sort of a web crawler software to find these names because they're so badly misspelled or maybe deliberately changed by some of these retailers. This is what it looks like, a little close-up of a patch of it. It tends to grow in these floating mats and spread in 4 directions from the parent plant by stolons, which are short runners from the mother plant. So it can produce 4 clones of itself in 4 directions, and then each one of those can then again send out more stolons and keep creating these daughter plants or clones of itself, and they end up forming these large floating networks of connected plants. The leaves themselves stick up into the air like little sails, so when a strong wind comes through, it will often break those clumps into several smaller clumps, which then can disperse themselves around the lake as they float around. This location, the photograph on the left, is actually my father-in-law's pond. This was when my wife and I were just dating for a little while. I first went up to his pond and saw this and was not thrilled by it, but he actually was caretaker of a larger property where there was a water garden on site, and like many others, he saw that this water hyacinth was just doing fantastic in this site, and the water garden could certainly spare a few so that he could take some and put them in his pond. So he did take a bunch. He took about 20 plants, he said, and has a 3-acre pond, and he split it into groups of 5, and he put 5 plants at each site, 4 different spots on the lake. And when I took this picture, we were counting this population. There were over 200 plants there, and this was about 4 weeks later after he had released those clumps into the pond. So it's amazing how fast it can grow. It's known to be able to double its biomass in under a week in most locations around the world, warmer climates, and in some cases can grow a couple feet tall. Not the case around here. It's typically 6 to 8 inches tall. The flower is a little bit taller, but in southern climates and in Africa, it can grow several feet tall. You can see the beautiful flower on the upper right. It's a member of the pickerelweed family. Very showy, pretty flower, which is obviously the biggest reason why people like planting it. The water lettuce, again, is very similar structure. It's a floating rosette of leaves with stolons going in 4 directions from the mother plant. Both of these species also have long, fibrous root systems that dangle beneath the plant. These root systems themselves can be multiple feet long, and with all the surface area that these things provide, they are very efficient at uptaking nutrients from the water column. So they're often sold in the aquarium trade, or more often in the water garden trade, as water purification species, because they are able to remove a lot of nutrients from the water column and then also compete with algae as well. So you'll also see them called algae busters sometimes because they are effective competitors against algae. This is another shot from the Mississippi River. You can see what the water lettuce looks like out in the wild. They often end up in these very stagnant back bays and sloughs wherever the wind pushes them, and you can see there's tons of duckweed piling up in this area too. All the other green that you see floating on the surface is all various species of duckweeds. And same situation, they're free-floating plants, so wherever the wind pushes them, they tend to collect in these back bays and slow-moving areas. So where do we find hyacinth and lettuce and parrot feather? They're all over the state. Every year we find a few more populations of this. Generally it's in August and September when these plants may have been in a water garden situation for a couple of months. They're probably getting very abundant, and that's the time of the season when people tend to thin these species out and dump them somewhere else. There's my contact information. If you want to email me photographs of anything, I certainly welcome that, or give me a call if you have other questions.
Thanks for watching this video from the Wisconsin First Detector Network. To learn about our network or to access additional information about invasive species in Wisconsin, please visit our website or contact us.